Hi, welcome to Talking and Reading from Japan. I'm your host, Hidemi Woods. I read episodes from the books I wrote here and talk about them or anything that just comes up into my mind. I hope you enjoy with me. Today I'll read an episode from one of my books titled An Old Tree in Kyoto. Today's episode is called My First White Guitar. This is about the white guitar my uncle gave it to me long time ago. My first white guitar. When I was 8, my uncle got married and left our house. He had collected small change in big jars and gave all of them to me when he left. I had always wanted him to leave soon, but I found a lot of toys that he had given me in all those years besides the small change. About 5 years later, he also gave me my first guitar. It was a white classic guitar that he won as a prize for a golf game with his friends. Although it was a cheap model, I had played it for years until it got completely tattered and I bought a new one for my first gig. While my uncle was a giver, his wife was very careful about money. She came to sell her homemade bread to my parents, or reaped away with her neighbors most of persimmons that my parents grew in my family's field. Long after I left home for music, she visited my parents' house and asked about my first white guitar. According to my mother, she wanted it back now that I had left home and hadn't used it anymore. I was purely surprised that she remembered the guitar. It must have been her long-time grudge that my uncle gave it to me. After 10 years, she retrieved the worn-out, battered guitar at long last. That was today's episode. My uncle, with whom I lived in my childhood, got married and left because he was an annoying man to me. I was so glad to see him leaving, and I was he moved out and I didn't have to live with him anymore. I was so happy with that because he was he pulled my legs and teased me all the time, and I was quite bothered by him in my daily life. But when he left, I realized how many gifts I had received from him. I found out how much he cared for me not just teasing me or making fun of me. He cared as well. That was the fun. That was the finding I got after he left. And he left me big jars of small change. And I remember I went up to his room, his empty room, but just those big jars, glass jars, were left for me, full of small change. I think he collected them for a hobby, and it's not mainly, it wasn't his main purpose to leave them to me as a gift, but eventually they came to me as his farewell gift. Whenever he took a trip with his friends, or he had a business trip, he went on a business trip, he never forgot to bring something to me as a souvenir. He got something for me on his trip, on his each trip. And I had quite a lot of toys and stuffed animals, and most of them were from my uncle. And so, although I really didn't like him so much because his childish, unrefined attitude, he cherished, I think he liked me as a niece. And although he was still young and not rich at all, he bought so many things for me and gave them to me. And I had never had a chance to appreciate it directly to him. But after his leaving, I realized his goodwill that was hidden under his rude, wild, unrefined, unsophisticated attitudes toward me. So, although while my grandparents were so stingy and my uncle was raised by them, my uncle himself was generous for some reason. That was why giving me so much gifts or bringing me back a souvenir at each trip of his was a proof how generous he was, at least to me. And he got married with someone he barely knew by an arranged marriage. According to my grandparents' order, he got married. And not to mention, they didn't exactly love each other. They were so different each other too. So I suppose their marriage was so difficult. And my aunt was about 10 years or so younger than my uncle. And I guess the mutual topics were scarce between them because of a generation gap. And their basic differences added to that, their generation gap. I suppose they had such hard time to be together as a family, as a married couple. And while my uncle was generous, my aunt was so stingy, or I should say too careful for money. And for instance, I remember that one time she visited our house with my uncle, and by that time they had 2 daughters between them, and 4 of them visited our house for an important event like nearby shrines festival. We used to celebrate the shrines festival all together with relatives and families in my house, and we treated them with traditional festive meals like sukiyaki. And as you know, in sukiyaki we put beef and tofu and many other kinds of vegetables like leeks and what do you put it? Leeks and other vegetables. And basically, in my family's sukiyaki, vegetables are mainly only leeks. And when my uncle's family visited for that event, and we surrounded sukiyaki together, and ate it together. My aunt told her daughters to eat as much as beef and don't touch vegetables because beef is much expensive than vegetables. So she scolded her daughters when they tried to pick vegetables. She just stop eating vegetable, eat beef, because this is not their house, our house. So beef was on us, not her. And so to her, beef looked like a big freebie on that day. So we held those big event in our house twice or 3 times a year. One was a shrine festival, and another was a Bon festival in the middle of summer. And then the biggest one, New Year's celebration. And that was 3 biggest family gatherings of my family. Or I think that was the typical Japanese families. Those were the similarly big events. And I felt so funny that for my aunt, those events are free food festivals. And she was careful for money in that degree. So I suppose when my uncle gave me the white guitar he had gotten from the golf game he played, I suppose my aunt was furious because handing out a freebie from them was out of the question for her, I guess. And so I hadn't known it at all. I hadn't even imagined or pictured of it, but my aunt must have held a grudge all those years for the guitar I got from my uncle for free. And so when I used up the guitar, it was really, really tattered after years I used for my music. Since it was the first guitar I got, I practiced a lot, and I played it a lot because I tried to learn by myself how to play it. So I literally used up it. So in the end, by the time I got the second guitar, that white one was really tattered with on the surface, the guitar surface, there are 6 pins that hold strings, each string. And my first, that white guitar didn't hold strings anymore. The pins kept putting the pins kept popping up by themselves all the time, and strings loosened, and because I tried to tune correctly, I strained strings, but the guitar didn't hold the force enough, and the guitar neck started to bend outward, and so by the time I finished using it, it was unusable almost. It was impossible to play it. So I was really surprised when I heard from my mother that my aunt came to retrieve that guitar, because it no one could use it anymore. It was unplayable. It was unusable. Even so, she tried to get it back. And I felt strong grudge of hers from that episode. No wonder she almost every time I saw her, she used to say to me, "You are so difficult." That was her habit to say to me. To her, I was too difficult, too unfriendly. And she kept saying it to me. And I wondered why she criticized me every time I saw her. But when I heard that she was getting back my guitar, I thought that explained it somehow. Maybe all those years she had played a revenge on me by criticizing my character for that free white guitar. That was all for today. Thanks for listening. I'm Hidemi Woods. Until next time, take care and be well.